You know what they say, and by they I mean the suits, the bosses, who America reports to in the workplace. You know what they say about artificial intelligence, that AI won't replace workers, but it will help boost productivity. Not sure I totally believe that, but in case you're coming off a long 3, maybe 4-day weekend, if we need to bring in AI to boost the performance of Darren Urban, Dani, Sureck, we reserve the right. Paulie podcast here on Cardinals Underground, brought to you by Pacific Office Automation. How productive do you feel right now, Dani?
Well, you have me sitting next to someone that I have to listen to, so I guess very productive, Paul.
I see.
Ask me off air.
Someone who might be involved in your employee review. Is that what you're saying?
Bingo.
Okay. Didn't really account for that.
I'm trying to figure out how Paul left himself out of the need for being more productive. It was just me or Dani whether we needed AI or not.
Well, it's sort of like a debate. The moderator is exempt. I just sit over here. I'm exempt from actual performance review, and you're just sort of moderating. And I get the ball to the playmakers. That's what I do around here. Okay, so here we are.
You're like Bronny James.
Okay. All right. We might get into that a little bit later. My only question about Bronny James is, if the Suns do indeed draft him, is that for the Suns or for the G League Suns? I'm just still a little unclear on that whole thing. What I'm not unclear about, to use a double negative right off the top, maybe we'll edit that out later, would be the difference between this time last year, this time this year, and maybe this time next year. And let me clarify, because there's 2 angles I'm going with that. Number one, it would be the fact that the Cardinals are already conducting situational football in May. Kyle Vandenbosch brought this up on the Red Sea Report, as once again, we attribute accordingly. He said, you know what? If you're out there and you're working the 2-minute, and you're working 4-minute, and you're working red zone, and other situational football, and it's only May, think about where you were this time a year ago. I mean, you were just trying to get 22 dive into the playbook and execute it correctly with your quarterback under center. Oh, no, wait. You didn't even have your quarterback out on that field at that time. So I'm going to surmise, are you guys with me? That's got to be a good thing, right? I mean, we have to see the benefit of that come week 1 and beyond. Just how much farther along the offense is, players are. Much more playing instead of thinking. All the above, right?
I would agree with that. And that makes the most sense, because then if you're working it early on, you get more time to work through those situations longer throughout the offseason. There are a lot of pieces on this offense when you're talking about starters that are carrying over from last year. That's huge when it comes to being able to start working on those 2-minute drills, 4 minutes, all that stuff here at the end of May. I will say I would imagine that in terms of rookies and maybe how often they're involved in those, it's probably not as much or as probably don't have as high expectations to know everything at that point, because they are still having to absorb so much of the basics of the language and all of that. However, it is good to get them exposed early. I would imagine there is a process to making sure that this staff is not throwing too much at them at once, right? You need to be able to master the basics before you can really get into the more complicated, the nitty-gritty plays, things of that nature. But again, especially with the offense, more so than defense, there's just so much carryover that it really makes sense. And then when it comes to the defense, you've added new pieces. You've added a lot of veterans who can handle maybe this heavier workload and adding these things in earlier. So yeah, I'd agree. It makes sense.
It's interesting because before we started recording this, the news came out that there's a potential of dramatically changing how the offseason might be done.
That's what I meant by this time next year.
Well,
potentially.
It's fascinating to me because everything, that you were just talking about and Dani was just talking about, I mean, this is important time for all these people. Now, you could in theory talk about it being later, but is it going to be later? Is it going to be constructed the same way? Is it voluntary still, the way they're talking about doing it and basically getting rid of all the on-field stuff right now and just starting training camp earlier?
What if you're a new coaching staff?
If you're a new coaching staff, what does it mean for the rookies? I mean, you could you could have something set up where the rookies come in earlier, but when they're not working with the rest of their team, what real good is that? It's not much.
I saw where the Bears, for example, have a new OC. Shane Waldron went from Seattle to the Bears. They obviously have the rookie quarterback, the number 1 pick overall, and Caleb Williams. And The Bears offense has been struggling through the offseason against the defense. Now the Bears, after the Montez Sweat trade, they really evolved into one of the better defenses in the league. We saw that late.
Is that true, Paul? Is that competitive advantage to say that the offense is struggling?
I'm just telling you what the beat writers were reporting
Fair enough.
out of the Bears. That's all I saw. Were various. And so I don't know what they're allowed to see and report, but there were a few defenders who were actually quoted as saying they went up to Caleb Williams and told him, hey, keep your chin up. It's the NFL. Guys have been doing this for a living for a long time. Yeah, we're gonna make you better. Just don't get demoralized out there because he threw some bad picks apparently and had some other bad reads and so forth. But once again, if you're a brand new coaching staff or you're a rookie quarterback, and if you're limiting the ability, as Darren said, I don't know. Is that the end result of it, Darren? I'll be honest with you. I didn't go through the entire report. I don't know how detailed it is. I know every one of the Cardinals players, all three of them, including the head coach, were all questioned about it on this Tuesday, about the potential for a different offseason, and nobody had anything solid to say whatsoever. So I'm not sure.
I mean, first of all, I know that there was a report that it could be in place as early as next year. I don't think that's the case. I mean, I would be surprised. And there's already been at least one player that I saw, Browns defensive lineman, and his name escapes me right now, that tweeted
Shelby Harris,
who immediately said on Twitter, like, what players are wanting this? Because none of the players I'm talking to want this.
Right.
I think there's a lot that goes into it. They didn't get super detailed, but essentially it would be you wipe out all the on-field stuff in the spring. You would potentially have virtual meetings where you could join via Zoom, but you wouldn't necessarily come in. And then you would come in much earlier, late June, early July, and start the ramp-up process for training camp. Now, obviously for people like us, that would dramatically change what we would do. But even for players, I mean, you're talking about if you're doing that, let's say you come in, let's just for argument's sake, you're saying the first week of July. So if you played in the Super Bowl, if you're on a team, you're with that team from the first week of July till mid-February. That's a long stretch. And I get some of it. Like, I know that there are coaches that kind of wonder right now, not that they want to dramatically change this, but they wonder right now, like, you do all this work in the offseason and then all of a sudden you stop for a month and you don't know what these guys are doing. Right. When you stop, you can lose a lot of the gains that you made physically and mentally that you're kind of restarting in training camp. So there's part of that argument, but at the other end, it's like that's a lot to be lumped together.
Think about it though. The NBA now, they start well before Halloween. Training camp starts in mid-September. If you're going to the NBA Finals, you're done around June 18th. So that's similar.
But I would also argue strongly that if you go to NFL players and NFL players say, if you want to make our minimum salary, like our average salary, like $6 million a year, we're good with that.
Well, and that was the first thought when I saw that report. I said, no, wait a minute. The commissioner, Roger Goodell, came out and said, 18-game season, that's what we desire. That's where we're going. He made that known, put it out in print. So now the NFLPA is countering with their own demands, their own wish list. Okay, guess what? If we're going to agree to an 18-game regular season and do it before 2029, which is when the next CBA is up, then here's what we need. Now, there are plenty of people out there, a lot of these sports business, sports legal minds who say that's not even close to being comparable value for the players. For the league to add an 18th regular season game and then cash that in, and all the players get is a revised offseason.
Well, a second bye week, I'd imagine. Right?
Yes,
you would
probably.
think a second bye week. And also, if you add another regular season game, inevitably you're going to have to give them more money.
True. There would be more money in the player pool.
But yeah, there's an argument to be made there.
So that's very intriguing. But yes, if you were to start that would be almost going full circle back to the days when you had 6 preseason games and camp started around July 4th. That was like 40 years ago. 45, maybe 50 years ago.
Believe it or not, 45. Yeah, we're probably
somewhere in that range.
We're probably late 60s.
Training camp and preseason right now is roughly 4-5 weeks.
I'd say 5.
5 weeks. So then it would be like 8.
8. But again,
every day with you guys.
Yeah, well, that's a fair point.
Hey,
I walked right into that.
It wasn't that long ago, and I'll test Darren. Here's a sports quiz for Darren. Wasn't that long ago when the Cardinals had 5 preseason games because they played in the Hall of Fame game.
Yeah.
And Larry Fitzgerald, who was at the end of his career, made a sort of snarky joke. This is what might drive me into retirement. 5 preseason games.
Here's the other side of that. You go to training camp the first week of July, and there's 2 games between the first week of July and September 7th, let's say. 2. Now, I know they're just preseason, but that's a long time to have to cover a team and talk about stuff that doesn't officially mean anything.
You should send the NFLPA a letter.
2 words, joint practice. You see where the Jets are doing 3 joint practices. They're doing a joint practice with every single preseason opponent, then playing the game.
How many games are home and away for them?
I wish I knew.
Is that a lot of travel?
They're an AFC team, so they would be playing 2 home games this year.
Interesting.
In fact, there was the Aaron Rodgers comment. He made this comment in the media, among other things, insane.
Yeah, be careful where you're going there with that, Paul.
There was one comment.
Make sure you're saying what the quote is.
Well,
his words.
I thought of Kyler Murray when he said, and I quote, "If I'm on the field and doing what I'm capable of doing, we've always got a chance," said the 4-time MVP. How many other quarterbacks in this league do you say that goes for? Do you need more than 2 hands to count the number of quarterbacks?
How many would say that comment?
Yes.
No,
all of them.
No, you could actually apply that comment too. That comment stands for how many quarterbacks in this league where if they're doing their thing, injuries don't matter. You know, who's in your receiver core doesn't matter. Remember the Cardinals were 7-0 3 years ago, and on Thursday Night Football, or was it Sunday night, Aaron Rodgers came to town. Thursday Night Football came to town. His top 2 receivers were injured. Bunch of guys you never heard of. And he beat the Cardinals because Aaron Rodgers did what he does, and he had an MVP season. If Kyler Murray is able to do what he does, and maybe better than ever this season, I'd say that comment goes for the Cardinals quarterback as well.
I would agree. I don't know that I would say 10 without really thinking through and
you
looking
think there's
at,
less or more?
Yeah, I was going to say there's probably 7 to 8.
See, I think there's more.
More?
Well, again, if we're saying what they're capable of doing, and if we're going to put Kyler in that realm, I mean, and I don't have a problem putting Kyler in that realm, but if we're putting Kyler in that realm, then we would need to put Jalen Hurts in that realm. We'd need to put Dak Prescott in that realm. You'd have quite a few quarterbacks.
Those are guys like Kyler who at times in their career have been legitimately included in the MVP conversation. When the Cardinals started 7-0, because I remember this vividly, I went back looking for something else, and in the broadcast, off the very top of the broadcast, the national network, they started by saying the 2 leading MVP candidates are squaring off tonight. And it was Kyler Murray against Aaron Rodgers. So if Kyler can get back to that. And by the way, here's my segue in 3, 2, 1. The last time Kyler had a top 10 rushing attack was the beginning of that season, was the first half of 2021. And we bring that up because James Conner met the media. He had a few things to say about Kyler's leadership and reinforced that, yes, he has evolved, he has grown in that department. In fact, it was interesting for James Conner to say, you know what, when I showed up, I wasn't exactly sure who the leader was on the team my first year as a Cardinal.
I did find that interesting that was just kind of the culture and how the locker room was set up and how that's not the case anymore. And Connor gave props to Kyler, how he is very clearly trying. And he's doing a nice job. It didn't come off as, he's trying to improve. It was, you can see the improvements. And it's not just with Connor, who he's been close with for a couple of years, or the receivers. It's also including the offensive linemen who are going out there, traveling, spending time together in the offseason to build that camaraderie. And hopefully that leads to chemistry out on the field. And we've talked about that here, how you can physically see, you can see the tangible differences in Kyler Murray's demeanor and what he's at least posting on social media, which he wasn't doing previously. If you can get a glimpse of that, of him doing workouts with his teammates and things like that outside the facility. So it makes sense for Connor to say that, but it was made very clear that there are leaders now in that locker room, and they all lead differently. Paris Johnson Jr. was saying how, as a leader, he is more quiet, kept to himself throughout the week, and then on game day comes
Right.
alive and is a lot more vocal in how he leads. And I mean, we know James Conner's demeanor. He is much more lead by example. And Dennis Gardeck said that when, Conner speaks, you listen, because he means what he has to say, and it's going to be important. So there's different kinds of leaders, and it's very clear that they have different leaders and that they're stepping up to the challenge in that locker room right now.
Yeah, we have a saying, dude factor. James Conner is high on the dude factor scale. He's just a dude that everyone in that room respects, and he doesn't have to say it because he shows it. If every NFL game, if every football game is a barroom brawl, well, you want to have a James Conner walking in next to you, right, when you go through that front door. So that's how he ends up being an unquestioned team captain. That's why Jonathan Gannon has told us more than once on his TV show last season that he runs a lot of stuff before he introduces it to the team, especially as a first-year head coach. He would run it past James Conner, and he would sort of gauge, all right, what's JC's reaction to this? What do you think the pulse of the room will be if I introduce this? He said there have been a couple of times where I came in and I instituted something, and actually James pulled me aside and said, might want to, evolve it in this direction. And I did. I took his feedback because that was sort of the pulse of the room. So that's interesting. I've told you guys about it on the sideline where there have been ultra physical plays, not just by the offense, but even by the defense. There was a 4th and 1 stop last year at home, and Conner had come off the bench, and he had a front row seat on the white stripe. And after the Cardinals made the stop and they stuffed the run, he just started pointing at his head and just mouthed the words, "It's a mindset. It's a mindset," meaning the physicality. So that's the kind of leadership you get. But it's interesting, once again going back to Kyler, because the rest of the quote was, sometimes you're just part of the environment, but that's no longer the environment here. And then he concluded by saying he's making an effort to bring the guys close. And if memory serves, when Conner first showed up, you had some big personalities: DeAndre Hopkins, J.J. Watt,
Chandler Jones.
So with that in mind, you're still a 23-year-old quarterback at that time. Larry Fitzgerald had just retired. It was most definitely Larry's team to a large degree. And then, so it's sort of been an evolution. And as some of these Hall of Fame names have retired or gone to another team, it's just come Kyler's way. He's sort of grown into it naturally.
Well, I agree with that. I mean, I think some of it also ends up being the evolution of everything, not just the leadership part of it. I mean, if Kyler wants to win, and where they've been the last couple of years, somebody's got to step forward. It's like if you're in any kind of business, eventually if decisions aren't being made and things aren't getting done, somebody's got to step up. And that can come from different places. It's natural for the quarterback to end up doing that. And I think it's important in this sport for the quarterback to do that. But on a very personal level, regardless of his position, I mean, if he wanted things to change, there's got to be some. You got to take the moment yourself and not just count on other people doing it.
And how many players have said over the years, show me an example of a championship team where the quarterback wasn't that guy, wasn't that player, wasn't that leader. Now, maybe if you have sort of a historically good defense like the Ravens, with Joe Flacco, I don't know, a Trent Dilfer with the Buccaneers. I mean, there could be.
Trent Dilfer with the Ravens.
Ravens, my bad. Who was with the Buccaneers?
It was Brad Johnson.
Brad Johnson, thank you. So, but more importantly, I think to the Cardinals and their fortunes this year, because the whole leadership thing, okay, that's great. What happens when the game actually starts? And when Jonathan Gannon gave an example to the media of a, quote, pretty souped up call, end quote, by Nick Rawlis during one session where he, brought the house, did something pretty exotic on defense, and Kyler didn't flinch, didn't blink. According to Jonathan Gannon, quote, he's never sped up, and that he was able to read that defense and just get the ball out immediately to the right player, to the right person, made the right read. And Gannon joked that, quote, I probably would have freaked out if I was playing quarterback and watched that unfold in front of me. So not only the mastery of the offense here in year 2, but then overall year 6 for Kyler Murray just in the NFL. He's getting to the point where he's seen most everything.
It doesn't surprise me to hear that because that's what we've picked up on from watching games and practices and seeing Kyler's intelligence and how quickly he can read things and kind of splice up a defense. I also feel like you can pick that up for him as a person when you learn and hear stories about how competitive he is and his drive to win and to want to be the best. There are times when you can see a quarterback, maybe not even in a game, even at practice, and you can see, okay, this is hard for them, right? Like they're really having to think through this, and the decision is not good today. I don't feel like we ever really see that with Kyler. And it's not in the sense of him being lackadaisical or, just whimsy with it. It just seems like he's out there. He can read a defense. He knows where his receivers are supposed to be, and he can get the ball out quickly.
I do want to. It's so easy to fall into this trap because he's not old by any stretch of the imagination, and he's never going to be old in my eyes, obviously, even if he plays 15 years, to be honest. But this is his 6th season. It's not like he just got to the league. And I understand he's had some changes and he had to go through an injury, but my goodness, I would hope that you've made a lot of these strides after 5 seasons playing in the NFL.
Right. Well, and that's sort of my point. If he's mastered this system, which we all agree was radically different than any system he had ever run in his career, plus the NFL experience in general, okay, what does that mean here in year 2? Like, there are certain players who have been identified as taking that jump in year 2. Could Kyler in year 2 of this offense be one of those players? Everything that we've seen at times, once again, the first half of 2021, when he's a legitimate MVP candidate, you can't tell me that Kyler doesn't see some of these prop bet MVP rankings, right? In the top quarterback rankings. And Kyler's,
so he's just looking at the betting odds? Is that what?
Well, just on social media. I mean, they're everywhere. They're just these graphics. I mean, we have a top 10 quarterback MVP odds, and Anthony Richardson is 8th. He's had less than 5 games in the NFL. Really? So if Kyler is that competitive, and he is, and he's that aware of everything around him, and he is, you can't tell me that isn't a little extra motivation. That's all. And by the way, speaking of big-time jumps, Dennis Gardeck, quote, "It's been an explosive kind of jump." Talking about B.J. Ojulari. And have we not been talking about B.J. Ojulari for a couple of weeks now? And just the rave reviews he's getting out on that field. So, okay, what's coming? Dare we say it's exactly what the Cardinals need. Maybe exactly why they didn't go out and try and pursue a trade or a free agent. Not that there's a ton available that's affordable when it comes to an edge rusher, but they held their hand with Zaven Collins, B.J. Ojulari, Dennis Gardeck, drafted Xavier Thomas, who also am I missing in that mix. And so you know what? Okay, let's go, because based on, look, they know better than anyone that perhaps they have legitimate reason to have much greater expectations of B.J. Ojulari in year 2.
I think when you're looking at that room as a whole, it's a little bit of both for what you were saying. We saw flashes, we saw sparks from this group last year, which does have a lot of carryover. Might be the group that has the most carryover when you look at it, at least on the defense. So you saw sparks. I also think what you were saying was true, was when you're looking at free agents available and does that fit with the money you have and the money you want to spend, I do think it made more sense to address the defensive line and the secondary the way that the Cardinals did. Again, because you saw some sparks from this group. That's not to say that I don't think the spotlight is on them this year, because I do. I think this is a very big year. Zaven Collins didn't have his 5th-year option picked up. This is a big year for that room, because I do think that where things stand right now, this has got to be priority number 1 to address in the offseason if there is not a jump, not just looking at sack numbers, but just disruption from that group this year. Now, there are always expectations, especially for a high draft pick like B.J. Ojulari going into year 2. Gardeck did talk about that, the growth he has seen from Ojulari, and that's more of the mental side. You know, that first rookie year, you don't have a break because you're playing in college, and then you're prepping for the draft, and then you've got rookie minicamp, OTAs, training camp. It's nonstop. Now having that full offseason for the first time allows players to really grasp what needs to be done by them, where they need to improve. All of those matters. It was interesting hearing Gardeck talk about the differences with Zaven Collins, because Collins and Ojulari are both really in year 2 at this position here with the Cardinals. Just Collins has been in the league longer, and hearing how from Gardeck's perspective, the growth for Collins going into year 2 is more about, I think the quote was like, letting your hair down, let your hair fly, right? Just think less, which is...
He would know.
Right? He's got a nice head of hair on him. And that's what we've heard from previous coaching staffs and from this coaching staff is Zaven Collins is just, he's almost too smart.
Didn't we hear that last week? What was our saying? Think less, savage more.
Yes.
Did we not say that last week?
Yes.
Oh, I thought we were talking about you, Paul.
So I do think that you can get sparks. I think beefing up the D-line through free agency and the draft will have a trickle-down effect as well. I do still think there is a spotlight on this group, which I said last week as well.
You know what we need? You know what BJ Ojulari needs? He needs a nickname.
Oh boy!
I think we
Isn't
need
that
to.
what BJ is?
I think we need to get ahead of the game on this.
Wait.
We need a nickname.
Paul saying we need to get ahead of the nickname game feels very like a loaded.
I'm
thing.
nervous because this means Paul already has a nickname in mind, and we did not screen this.
No, I think something needs to revolve around the number change, right? Number 9. What can we do with number 9?
9 is fine, Paul.
Yeah, Cloud 9. The whole 9 yards. I don't know, 9 ball. Maybe he gets a sack and pass yells out, rack 'em, something like that. I don't know. I mean, we need to do something with 9.
I feel like we need to workshop this off air, though.
Yeah, edit that out. That's bad. That's just
I always appreciate it because I know you're the nickname guy.
I try.
I know you do.
I'm the try-hard nickname guy. I can't say many are successful.
Ojulari.
It's not funny. It's not funny. It's that you're taking the Isaiah. I will say this, though. No matter how bad my track record stands in terms of nicknames, it still pales in comparison to how horrid Ron Wolfley's track record with nicknames is. So there's always Wolf who's bringing up the rear.
I'm just going to state for the record, I always enjoyed the Japanese fighting fish.
Oh, you didn't?
Yes, I did.
No, that's revisionist history.
No,
absolutely not.
Fitz doesn't like it, but I do.
Fitz hates it. The only thing Fitz hates more than that is blocking. So, by the way, let's flip that. Dennis Gardeck, what does he love? The new kickoff rule. Do you see how the zeal and zest and how earnest he was in his answer when someone asked him about the new kickoff rule? The guy, who's the special teams player extraordinaire, and he said, I love it. He said, I'm excited about it. He said there's a lot of uncertainty about it, which he loves.
Well, he gets to do something on kickoffs again.
Right, wasn't his comment, I don't want to run all the way down the field just for a touchback?
It'll be fun when we get a real taste of it at preseason. Because right now, I mean, they're not really even having contact with each other. So it's really just like going through the basic motions. It was at Tuesday's practice, we were out there. It was kind of weird. I was standing next to Zach Gershman, and I was like, it's kind of weird seeing 2 returners and having to listen to them yell at each other, and it's you, it's me, and working on the like that. It looks funky still.
The cool part for me, you say about what it's going to look like in preseason. Obviously, in training camp, it won't be completely normal. But I would talk to Jeff Rogers, the special teams coordinator, earlier in the offseason for a story that I did about this, and he said that one of the issues you always had practicing kickoffs and kickoff return in training camp is it takes so long. It takes so long for the ball to get down there and everybody runs. Where everybody is now, it's a quicker process. So he said there's a high likelihood that they'll actually be able to practice the plays in training camp practices now more than they used to.
That's spoken like somebody who's been coaching special teams for 25 years. That's wow. Okay, that's interesting. Just watching the cover team line up across from the return team, and there's a 5-yard gap. Mm-hmm. First of all, there were some media members going, wait a minute, I thought it was 10 yards. No, it's 5 yards. They're separated by 5 yards, but they can't move until the ball is either touched or hits the ground.
Which is also interesting because then you're having, players having their head turned of seeing and that's part of it. But yeah, it was very interesting. I took a video too and I put it on Twitter from it, but it's interesting to see the changes.
The one thing, it's funny that they were saying the 10 yards. A lot of people heard that it's like the XFL rule and then assumed when they're watching video of the XFL kickoffs that it's the exact same thing, and it's not. And I remember Rogers telling me that. And in fact, Jeff Rogers told me that because I had talked to him 3 weeks after the owners' meetings where they passed it. They passed it at the owners' meetings, and then he said they had already tweaked it since then.
Wow.
So it's already a little different than when they originally announced it in a couple little areas. But yeah, the head turning thing is to me fascinating because he said at one point he said there's going to be things we're teaching these guys that we've not had to teach them before, and I brought up the head turning thing later, and he goes, that's one of the things I'm talking about. He goes, so what do you have them looking back at what you're probably going to do is the blockers are going to have to just stare straight ahead at their guy, and they're just going to have to react to those guys, because if your head is turned, the guy might be past you by the time you react once the ball is touched, because they get to look right at it.
In my observation out in the field, and I would ask Jeff Rogers if he's here right now, I'd be like, geez, Coach, what do you think the odds are there's going to be a ton of violations of guys leaving early?
That was going to be my question. Have you guys seen anything about it, what the penalty is for that?
Because it's going to be akin to an NBA free throw. Guys are into the lane before the ball's out of the shooter's hand. Now a sack fly in baseball, much more precise. Guys don't get away with much there, but I mean, you're telling me that there won't be, 18 guys out there on that field who aren't prone to leaving a little bit early in gamesmanship and trying to get an edge on the – I mean, I'm really curious how that's going to play out in reality.
Well, the one thing I did ask Jeff Rogers about how they might apply penalties, and he said he thinks that the idea is going to be that they're going to let the play roll, and then you would add penalty yardage on to the end of the play.
Either way, it's needed. It's necessary. There were almost 2,000 touchbacks last year. In this Super Bowl, someone on the sideline said there were 13 kickoffs, 0 returns, and that less than 20% of kickoffs resulted in a return last year.
I thought Gardeck was funny. I mean, he was being serious, and he was like, I don't want to run all the way down there just for a touchback. Like, I want to ready to get my hands on someone.
It's a dead play, and if they were going to allow it to stand as is, they would just be eliminated eventually. That based on also the fact that some of the injury rates related to that play were not good.
The play was going to go away. If they didn't fix it dramatically, it was going to go away.
We haven't had enough to change an answer. It did make me think about asking the two of you a question, though, watching at practice all of this on Tuesday. And they have 90 players, right? So there's so many returners that they are just rotating through right now. And I'm thinking, I know we talked recently about if at all this is going to change how rosters are configured, right? And we're talking about how many running backs are currently in this room. It doesn't make sense logistically for the Cardinals to keep that many. And then we're watching the kickoffs at practice on Tuesday. And I'm thinking, do they keep what do they have, 6 running backs in that room right now? And you've got returners. And I know we haven't seen enough to have an answer, but I did think about that and having to remind myself to ask the two of you later in training camp once we get a closer look of, I know we were told, it won't really, adjust roster configuration. I think it will. I
want to see who.
To a certain extent.
I want to see you mentioned the 2 lines that are 5 yards apart. Who are in those lines? Like, does it look a lot like before, or is there a significant difference?
And what's the best sort of return man, right? Your return specialist. I mean, in the past, if you had a Greg Dortch, because there's more space, right? There's more room to operate. If it's a much more confined situation, a 170-pound dude doesn't work as well as maybe a Trey Benson or a DJ Dallas. So I'm curious, what's the best sort of return
Well, here's
man?
my question. Do you think there's going to be more space or less space?
I'd say less.
I would think more.
Okay. Based on?
Because you're already going to have a head start before these guys can even move, in theory, because you're catching the ball in theory on the run, perhaps, maybe not on the run, but you're going to have a little momentum before they can even move, and that's before they can really pinch down. And I just think, there's going to be more of the across.
Right.
The horizontal space might be a little bit less, but I would think there'd be less. That's just that would be my guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Look,
But we can debate it, Paul, if you really want.
No. Well, the other aspect of it, too, is, okay, if you have a straight line of the kick cover team, do you have a safety of any sort back there? You can't count on your kicker. What if somebody gets through to the second level, if you will, of a kickoff return?
Somebody just kind of drop back?
Right. Who's your safety who can actually tackle? With all due respect, 40-year-old Matt Prater's not going to tackle anyone in space. So there's just so much about it that it's actually doing the unthinkable and making the preseason intriguing.
Hey.
Right?
Maybe we should keep that third game.
Yeah. By the way, Dani,
just kidding.
Your question earlier was something along the lines of the position group that received the least attention or didn't evolve as much as any other, right? Either you're talking about the edge, right? The edge players
Didn't
or
get
whatever.
free agency attention.
Oh, yes.
I'd say the safeties, I'd throw that in there just because it's my segue into, doesn't it seem like it's really been a quiet offseason when it comes to a Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson? Just haven't heard much.
Is that bad?
No, not necessarily. Although,
So are you wagering that they will or will not talk to the media?
I'd say
Be
not.
brought in
I'd
front of
say
the
based
media.
on what we've seen, just not. It's just maybe by choice. I'm not
We've
sure.
got 3 more media availabilities before the end of the preseason.
I mean, in the
End
past,
of the offseason.
one of those two would always be near the front end of any media availability. So we haven't heard from either one of them yet.
Well, in theory, we're still talking about 9 players have to come out. So
I saw the Sirius, and the other thing I saw out there, Sirius NFL Radio throughout their off-season position rankings. Okay, and they got to safety, and it's the top 5 teams at every position. Do you see this? And
You told me about it, and you
Yeah.
were very passionate about it, so I'm excited for you to share that.
Okay, but I didn't tweet it out because I had to pump the brakes, and I thought, all right, maybe
See? Gotta pump the brakes.
maybe I'm too much of a homer on this one.
I'm not saying I disagree
who
with
would
you.
ever call you a homer, Paul?
I maybe it's my affinity for JT and Budda Baker, but I looked at 6 other teams ahead of the Cardinals. At least 6 other teams. You don't even know where they have the Cardinals duo rated, but Chicago and Dallas with a better safety duo than the Arizona Cardinals. I get it. You win 4 games, you're under the radar just in general, but considering Budda's been to how many Pro Bowls at this point every year for the last 6 or 7 straight years, I just thought maybe, just maybe, he might actually crack that list. So
I feel like Jalen Thompson's one of those players that nobody knows outside
Right.
of Arizona,
Yeah.
though.
So anyway, I throw that out there. I also wonder what Budda thinks of the Antoine Winfield contract, which was mind-boggling that a safety would get that much money, and a safety is now the highest paid defensive back in the league.
Especially when we were just having a conversation earlier in the offseason about safeties were
Yes.
starting to not get the big contracts.
Yeah, so that whole deal is definitely interesting to me. But the biggest holy cannoli stat from the Tuesday media availability between Dennis Gardeck, Paris Johnson Jr., James Conner, and then the head coach Jonathan Gannon is the following. Paris Johnson Jr. has never, ever been a team captain. Really? And then he explained the circumstances, right, Dani?
He said he transferred in high school his senior year, and even though he was the top tackle in the nation, he was told, you just got here, we can't make you a captain. And he said, I understood players that had been there for a long time, that's fine. Then he goes to Ohio State, top tackle, still not a captain. And I guess in high school he started joking that, my time will come in the pros. And now it seems like that
Yes.
is what would likely happen.
Yeah.
I can for sure see Paris becoming a team captain at some point. And he said that's a goal for him. And, leadership is something he has been very intentional about this offseason, especially with DJ Humphries no longer being on the roster. The two of them are still very close. In fact, Paris said he recently bought a house near DJ and said that he's just going to start yelling DJ's name out the backyard when he wants him to come over. But
good.
Paris was saying, he wants to be the type of leader that Humphries was, of always having that big smile, the positive attitude, being that consistent person, because having a veteran for Paris during his rookie year last year, saying that, DJ always brought the good attitude and the positivity, allowed me to just kind of focus on what I needed to do. And so Paris wants to be that type of leader for everybody else in that offensive line room. So I'm sure that getting that captain patch is in his near future, if I had to guess.
Shout out to Paris Johnson Jr.'s neighbors. He stands 6'7", 300-something pounds. So before you shout out your own winner, shut it on a Sunday morning or whatever, just beware. He's an extra large man down there. So he also said he has a secret handshake with James Conner, which doesn't surprise me because he had to check that box, scratch that itch, if you will, because he had a secret handshake on the sideline with DJ Humphries as well.
Quick clarification. How secret is the secret handshake when you're doing it in front of thousands of people every week?
Still secretive, Darren.
That's not my description. It's his description. I'm
right,
just saying.
just
He's
checking.
just over there.
Maybe they have a second handshake.
Yeah. So,
One for public and one for private.
Yeah.
don't know.
By the way, I was explaining to Craig Grillo, going back to nicknames, there could be a brewing controversy here a little bit internally.
You want to give Gree a nickname?
In that Trey Benson has been known for a long time as Big Play Trey.
Ooh.
So you know what this means?
So Paul's going to throw
What
down
does
with
it
Trey
mean,
Benson.
Paul?
It means that we have to go with the Calvisi Consulting default nickname that we threw out last year, Trey McPlay. Sorry, Trey. Big Play Trey is already taken. I don't care whether you earned that in high school and at Colorado State or not, but Trey Benson comes in with that nickname. So you are going to fit into Trey McPlay.
So we're keeping both. Trey McBride is Trey McPlay.
Correct.
And Trey Benson, the rookie running back,
Yes.
is Big Play
Why?
Trey.
Why does
Trey.
Good
Trey
luck
Benson
not getting
get,
that mixed up
Why
on
does
air,
Trey
Paul.
Benson get to keep that one? He's the rookie.
Well, because, they're both quality nicknames. So, we need to.
They're both quality names,
Yeah.
or you came up with Trey McPlay and you really
It's
want to
his
get that back
consulting
in there.
business. Let him make decisions as he
That's true.
pleases.
And I know McBride a little bit better, and I keep Wolf off McBride, so he owes me one. Okay, so I keep Wolf away from Trey, or else he just starts talking run blocking ad nauseum. So
Wolf does that
Trey
to
McBride.
Danny. Well, why would Trey McBride be any
Hey,
different?
don't throw me under the bus.
That's right. So okay. Any other takeaways from what you heard at the media session in terms of all right, well, that was interesting.
I just think that we are in this time frame. I mean, this is going fast. They've got a couple more days this week. They've got next week, and then minicamp, and then it's
Wow.
For all the conversations we had about how the offseason might change. It hasn't changed this year, and it's almost over. And I'm going to be fascinated to see what this team looks like when we finally get to training camp and however many open practices there are, 9 or 10, that kind of thing. And whether this team can make that kind of jump. We keep talking about all these great things. I mean, I think it's fascinating to me that how much leadership we're talking about here, whether it's Paris or Kyler or James Conner or whomever, when, again, I contrast that from where I sit in the Valley, and all we heard all Sun season was that they didn't have any leadership. I think the Cardinals seemed like they're in pretty good shape with that. Now, again, that's got to translate on the field, and we'll see how that goes.
By the way, if LeBron comes to the Valley, look out. That's going to be a vacuum of media coverage like you've never seen before.
He could come play edge rusher.
Didn't he play a little high school football? He did,
yes,
didn't he?
Did. He was
did,
a wide
right?
receiver.
It was ridiculous. He's out
If
there
you
at
go,
6'8".
if you want to go back, him and Kevin Durant played flag football or something like that, like touch football during the NBA strike back in the day, or lockout or whatever. And you can find the video on YouTube and it's ridiculous. I mean, watching him go up for passes and stuff. I'm sure for all that debate over whether NBA players could play in the NFL or vice versa, we've all said this. I mean, I think LeBron James would have been just fine as an NFL player.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, I totally agree on that one. No question about it. All right, so speaking of open practices, I was carrying Grialou and Kyle Vandenbosch on the Red Sea Report. I missed the open portion of practice. Anything to report? Any top highlights?
It was open, Paul.
Any top highlights that happened? Kyler, let's just get right to it. This is where I'm going anyway. Kyler to Marvin Harrison Jr. Did it happen with frequency? What did it look like, Dani? That's what people want to know.
The interesting timing is the part of practice that is open for us to report on and take photos and videos. There are very few passes between quarterback and receivers at that time, and that's also on the far field in the opposite corner behind like a lot of big equipment and people walking, so it's pretty obstructed. So that's my way
Dani's
of saying
thinking about bringing
no.
a stepladder.
That's my way of saying no big throws from K1 to Marvin Harrison Jr.
While we were
able to
report.
report.
Okay.
I feel safe in saying that chemistry will come together before it matters,
Really?
even if we're not allowed to report on it.
Okay.
Yeah, are you concerned about that?
A little bit. I mean, are they going to get enough meaningful reps together in the preseason? Will they risk that to actually translate into the regular season? But you're saying you're pretty dang confident that, boom, against Buffalo, week 1, that's going to be a productive combo? Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying they're going to. You're making it sound like I'm just saying we can't report on what's going on. I'm just saying I'm not worried about. You're making it sound like they're not even getting reps when we're not allowed to report.
No, I didn't say that.
I know you didn't say that, but you sound like you're worried about it.
No, I'm saying reps on air, as we all know, is vastly different than regular season reps.
Okay, then none of right now
Just
matters
wondering.
anyways.
No, I just wonder. Okay, no, I was
Get a good look in Indy.
I was
joint
encouraged
practices.
by your confidence. I really was. I was trying to. Okay.
They can both play football. They'll be fine.
Here's what Michael Wilson had to say on Arizona Sports last week about Marvin Harrison Jr. And they asked him just first impressions, takeaways, and he said, and I'm loosely quoting here, "You're able to get a good tell of a person's personality after just a couple of days." This is, once again, Michael Wilson on Marvin Harrison Jr. He's not extroverted, but he's extremely confident in himself. You can tell that he has a natural feel for the position. He's able to do things not many players are able to do. He's also extremely detail-oriented as well. He hasn't had hardly any MEs, mental errors, or busted plays, and I know I couldn't say that about myself this point last year. So Michael Wilson said. He also made it known that people don't take into consideration just how hard it is being a rookie in the NFL. Trying to process everything and then simultaneously trying to play fast. Know the offense, know the game, know the opposition, know what they're throwing at you, and try and play fast, because that is the name of the game in the NFL. So I thought that was a pretty astute observation from his rookie season, Michael Wilson. And maybe, just maybe, everybody's sleeping on Michael Wilson to some degree this year. I don't know, Dani. Look, he flashed pretty dang well at the very end of last year when he finally got Kyler's trust.
Right. Once it seemed like Michael Wilson had enough experience to feel comfortable in himself, and then again, you throw in the fact that he didn't have his starting quarterback for the first half of the season. So then once you get to the two of them to start having some chemistry, because as a rookie, he didn't have any experience with Kyler, right? Nothing previous years or in the offseason. So if you're going to go based off that, I would say, yeah, Michael Wilson's trending upwards for year two based on how he ended last year. He's been one of the consistent faces we've seen in social media posts working out with Kyler and putting in that work. So I would imagine that he's poised for a big year, especially if defenses right off the bat are just going to zero in on Harrison Jr. I mean, let Michael Wilson go and put up a good fight on the other end.
Does that happen, do you think?
Defenses automatically give extra attention to Marvin Harrison Jr. right out of the gate?
I don't know about
Great question.
one.
Great question. Does the gravitational pull of a defense automatically go towards number 18? It's a legitimate question. If he puts a few plays on film in the preseason, I'd say yes. All that extra attention that Trey McBride Trey McPlay got the end of last season, I think it does go towards Marvin Harrison Jr. And if not McBride, then I think Michael Wilson is the beneficiary of that. If not, James Conner himself. That's the question I asked James Conner. Just, are you going to see lighter boxes just because the Cardinals got a receiver number 4 overall?
I wouldn't disagree. I say this, and we're so far away from it. It also wouldn't surprise me if we don't even see a lot of Marvin Harrison Jr. in preseason games for that exact reason.
Yeah.
Knowing how much this coaching staff really thinks about competitive advantages, this far away from preseason, it wouldn't surprise me. Not to say he wouldn't play at all, but that we wouldn't see a lot of him for that exact reason.
Story that I've told before, but I'll tell it again. 2003, these are the days of 4 preseason games, and I think Anquan Boldin had 2 catches in the preseason, and he wasn't going to play in the final preseason game. And I'm talking to Jerry Sullivan, who was the offensive coordinator, receivers coach at the time. And I'm like, why? I thought Anquan Boldin was supposed to be this guy that you guys were really going to count on. And he goes, oh, we're going to count on him. He goes, this was the Friday before the first game. He goes, we're going to he goes, watch Sunday. He goes, you'll see why we didn't want to play him a lot. We didn't want anybody to know what was coming, but you're going to see what's coming. And, of course, we know that first game, 10 catches, 217 yards, 2 touchdowns. Now, I'm not saying that that's what Marvin Harrison's going to do against Buffalo, but
that's why I jumped on your comment earlier, Darren, when you said you were confident that there's going to be instant chemistry and production between Kyler and Marvin Harrison Jr. Because to Dani's point, he might not play a lot in the preseason.
I don't know if you get a whole lot out of playing in the preseason, and I'm okay. Now I'm gonna sound. Here's how I feel about preseason games. I mean, I'm not sitting here saying he's going to go 10, 217 and 2. And I'm not sitting here saying he's going to have 100 catches as a rookie. But if you can play, you can play. And if you've got a good quarterback, which he does, to me, that's what's going to make him good. Yeah, they're going to get reps in practice. They'll get enough to do that stuff. But like whether they play a whole bunch when it doesn't count, I really don't think that matters. I really, truly don't think that matters.
And that's why, comments like that are intriguing, because I don't think we will know. There won't be much visual evidence as to what's coming week 1 at Buffalo. I just know, to finish up the thought with Michael Wilson, what he said on Arizona Sports, he said, as an example, a year ago, I was out there running routes, but now this time around, I know when Kyler calls a play. I know what his read progression is. I know when I'm the main read or the main target against a certain coverage. Now I recognize all those coverage. He said last year I didn't totally understand even the offense, our scheme, much less the defense. He said now I understand the matchup, the coverage we're trying to exploit from an offensive coordinator's perspective. So all these things go into it. And that's why I wonder, okay, Michael Wilson, for more reasons than one, might actually be poised for a big season as well if he can stay healthy. And we know how important that is to him on that front. So,
and I think it's also important to remember they can't all have big seasons, at least statistically. You're not going to have Marvin Harrison with 90 catches and Michael Wilson with 80 catches and Trey McBride with 75 catches. That's not going to happen. So these guys could have really good seasons. Just statistically, it won't blow up because you've got other people. And also, when you have all those stats, you better be scoring a ton of points and holding the ball an awful lot. And they've still got to show they can do that on a consistent basis.
Justin Jefferson's rookie year, he had 1,400 yards receiving. 1,400 yards even. Jamar Chase the next year had 1,455 yards receiving and was a Pro Bowler in the Offensive Rookie of the Year. Are you saying, Darren, just the nature of this offense, that Marvin Harrison Jr. wouldn't be featured to such a degree?
No. What I'm saying is if Marvin Harrison has 100 catches, Michael Wilson might have a really good year but only have 500 yards. That's what I'm saying. If Marvin Harrison is getting 100 catches, then Trey McBride might be a better tight end than last year, and his stats might go down. That's what I'm saying. They can't all get huge stats.
Well, and again, if the run game evolves, you had a top 5 run game a year ago, and if it evolves, then there's going to be a lot of catches off play action. There's going to be a balanced offense.
That's all true. And again, but like I look back, like the 2008 Cardinals had 3 1,000 yard receivers and were hellacious in the pass game, but their run game was dog duty. So at least in the regular season. Yeah. So I'm like, something has to give.
Right. And by the way, I thought it was an astute question to James Conner at the very end of his press conference just about his fit for this offense. That what they want to do in the run game just suits his strengths, who he is as a player, and you understand why he missed 4 games last year and still had his first ever 1,000-yard rushing season.
Violent. I believe that was the word used in the question of that's what the coaching staff wants, that's the style they're coaching, and that's the style of running that James Conner likes to use. And so it is a match that works out well for both sides, a good pairing. And Conner talked about, that played a role as to why he did have such a spectacular season, the best in his career statistically last year without even playing every game.
I want to know when this podcast becomes more violent, Paul. When are you going to step up?
I'm glad you brought that up because maybe the better phrase instead of violence would be cram it vertical. Why haven't they embraced cram it vertical? Why don't they use that in a public setting? Why not?
I actually am keeping a list of things that you would like to, champion.
Yeah. Institute.
Trey McPlay, cram it vertical. I'm
Big
planning
play
on taking
Trey.
it to Brandon Schwab and see if we can go ahead and get that painted on the walls in the locker room.
Just make sure that it comes directly from Paul Calvisi when you're pitching.
Once again,
technically, Gannon was the first person to say cram it vertical.
Exactly. It's his words. We pulled it. It was out of his mouth. Cram it vertical.
Now, between Zach Gershman and Paul Calvisi, they have hung on to that phrase like there's no tomorrow. But it was Jonathan Gannon first.
That's good. All right. Well, the folks in R&D have been tasked with BJ Ojulari. Right now, the clubhouse leader is 9 ball.
I am so excited
Rack 'em.
for next week's show when we get the official Okay, we're not talking about Pico de Gallo, the dog, anymore, and we're talking about BJ Ojulari.
You know what we are talking about as we wrap this up? This headline I saw in the Wall Street Journal over the weekend. You ready for this, Dani?
Yes.
This is the actual headline. I regret to inform you that sweatpant jeans are sweeping America.
So they look, it's denim on the outside, sweatpants on the inside?
It looks like denim, but apparently it's sweatpant material. It's, quote, a hybrid pant, comfy enough for working from home and presentable enough to wear in public. It's a viral hit, and there's an actual customer, satisfied customer, who's quoted. She says, everyone is legit shocked when they find out they're actually sweatpants.
So these are the new jeggings?
I want to know who's using I in a headline. What kind of journalism is that?
It's sort of like it's sort of like a first person regrettable, type thing. So anyway, there's
would that be approved, Darren, if I wore those to work? Yeah. Would I get in trouble?
On a Friday, it's perfectly fine, I would say.
No, well, I guess, can't wear jeans on another day.
I found out from my 14-year-old over the weekend, by the way. She informed me that, Dad, ankle socks are out, apparently. My low-cut Nike ankle socks, just with regular Nike shoes.
So what are you supposed to wear?
Those are out. I don't know. I don't get it. Apparently, it's just she added it to the list of areas in which Dad doesn't have any Riz, apparently.
Socks.
So that's what.
Palm up a heart. It's fine. I'm not going to get into it, the two of you.
You sound so disappointed when you bring that stuff up.
No, I'm not disappointed.
She can only,
I didn't say you are disappointed. I said you sound disappointed.
Sometimes she's just weary from trying to educate us. And that'll do it for this edition. Cardinals Underground, brought to you by Pacific Office Automation.